Hi, I'm Greg Yellen with Reynolds & Reynolds, and this is Connected. Today I'm excited we get to sit down in studio with Jack Shepp. Jack is actually the spouse of one of our employees at Reynolds, and he recently went through a car buying process, did it completely online, and he was sharing his experience, and we thought it'd be really fun to share with everybody out there what the experience was like from the consumer's perspective. We talk a lot about things from the dealer's perspective and how to improve operationally and all these different things, but thought it'd be a great perspective to get the consumer on. So Jack, thanks so much for joining.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
So Jack, tell everybody a little bit about who you are, kind of what you do, how you got into needing a new car in the first place.
Yeah, so I've been in the energy industry for about the last 15 years, and I've moved around a fair amount, but I've had a company vehicle for a number of years. I was out west in Arizona, and was actually changing jobs, so I was going to be losing the company vehicle, and I was in a situation where now I needed a vehicle, didn't have one currently, and I'm moving across the country.
Yeah.
And so took on a role as a manager of marketing, innovation, and technology at a company here in Ohio, and started doing my search. So I was still located in Arizona, and just kind of figured out I knew I wanted a truck.
Yeah.
And started looking in Arizona. There's a lot of two-wheel drive trucks in Arizona.
Sure.
And so I also started looking in Ohio, and then started kind of narrowing things down from there. But I guess that's kind of a little about me.
Yeah. Yeah. So where in Arizona were you?
I was in Phoenix.
You were in Phoenix, or like downtown Phoenix, or one of
the? I would say the Far East Valley.
Okay.
Phoenix. Yep.
No, I love it out there. It's a great place, especially in the fall.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's the best time of year to be out there. It's fantastic. And then in the spring you got baseball. So
yeah, it's like 8 or 9 months of just absolute beautiful weather.
Yeah.
And then the few months in the summer are unbearable. You just kind of stay inside. But you get past that, and it's amazing.
Well, there's so much to do outside too.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can go. I mean, the hiking is just unbelievable, and then get on a 4-wheeler and romp around for a day, and it's just there's so much to do. I love it out there.
So we lived in Phoenix for about a year, but before that we lived in the Four Corners, like in New Mexico area. Yeah. And you want to talk about great hiking and exploring? it was really cool.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. Cool. So sorry, getting back to I guess the story. So you said that you started looking online, right? And you were looking for a truck. So how did you? Maybe let's start there. Why a truck? Is it so? I'm always curious about individuals and why they purchase the vehicles that they do. And I think a big part of it is vehicles. In some ways, it expresses sort of who you are. Sometimes it's a functionality driven thing, and a lot of times it's a blend of the two. Right? If you have a big family, you need 3 rows. But you also maybe you want a minivan, maybe you want a big SUV. Like there's different options. So I guess for you, why a truck? So start there.
Yeah. So I guess I'm kind of one of those weird guys that I cross shop all kinds of stuff I probably shouldn't be cross shopping. So like I look at trucks and sports cars and all that stuff. So we don't have any kids or anything right now, so I can be fairly flexible. Sure. I think with that. I've had a truck before, loved it. Yeah. And I've had a sports car before. I loved the truck more than I loved the sports car. So I knew I kind of wanted to go with the truck. Something I could drive in the snow coming back to Ohio. And I was buying a house out here, so wanted to be able to haul some stuff and be able to work on the house. So that's kind of what steered me towards going the truck route.
Yeah. Now, were you, in the full-size market, mid-size market, did you care?
I didn't really care. I've been pretty comfortable in small vehicles. I've looked at full-size trucks, really like them. I've owned a kind of a mid-size truck before and loved it. Yeah. So it was kind of between the full size and the mid size. I wanted something that was going to be really reliable, and something that would fit in the garage.
Yeah. So in your search, how important to you was inventory? So clear, you said truck, reliable, need to be able to tow stuff. Size wasn't a huge factor, but eventually, I assume anyway, I'm curious from your perspective, but I assume you got to a vehicle that you wanted, right? Like you wanted to buy a fill in the blank. Yep. How long did that take to get to the vehicle that you wanted to buy, or were you just kind of still just, whatever pops up, I'll take?
I would say I was still open. I had a pretty good idea of what I was looking for. And I test drove a couple trucks out in Arizona.
Okay.
And ultimately landed on a Tacoma.
Okay.
And test drove one, liked it. The double cab was great. I could haul extra people if I needed to, and yeah.
Okay, good. So you landed. That's interesting though, because you bought the vehicle online, but you still went into a dealership to drive a car.
Yeah.
Right? At some point, you visited a store.
Yeah, and I was interested in buying a vehicle in Arizona if it was the right vehicle.
Yeah.
Now I still had to drive it a couple thousand miles across the country, so I was good either way. I think there were some trade-offs. If I bought in Ohio, I was going to be kind of buying sight unseen,
right?
But I also didn't have to drive it all the way across the country.
Yeah. So what were the deciding factors for you then that made you ultimately decide to buy it sight unseen in Ohio versus one that you could have been in, seen, touched, and then I consider it a nice break-in, right? You get to get used to your new vehicle. So what was the deciding factor or set of deciding factors for you? You landed on a Tacoma. You drove a Tacoma in a dealership in Arizona. Why not buy that one? Why did you end up deciding to do it from a store in Ohio?
So I was actually really considering buying that vehicle.
Right.
And I started looking at it a little closer, realized it was a 2-wheel drive. And I knew I really wanted a 4-wheel drive. They didn't have a 4-wheel drive Tacoma, and I really wasn't finding what I was looking for in Arizona, which was 4-wheel drive, single owner, clean Carfax, just under 50,000 miles kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I was buying, about 5 or 6 months ago. So it was, the car market was still a little more heated.
Sure.
So finding good deals was a little more difficult.
Yeah.
I've lived in Ohio before, so I was familiar with some of the dealerships out here. And I like going on websites and kind of researching dealerships and kind of seeing how they're reviewed. And, for me, the experience at the dealership is important, who I interact with and making sure it feels good when I'm there.
Yeah.
So I started pulling up just different dealership websites and kind of looking at what they had for sale in this area.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, came across one that had a Tacoma for sale, and it checked all the boxes. The price was right. And so then I was like, well, that's great. I'm not moving for a few weeks. So I've never bought anything online before, sight unseen. So,
especially that kind of that large of a purchase, right? Like we've all probably bought, a bag of socks on Amazon or something, but it's a little different when you're buying a truck.
Yeah, and I, certainly with it being a used vehicle as opposed to new. When you buy new, you kind of know what you're getting. So I'm trying to think, okay, how do I get myself comfortable with potentially taking the next step here?
Yeah,
and flying out here was an option, but it's fairly cost prohibitive and would take a lot of time. So I actually went online and was looking at the reviews of the dealership, and I was looking for kind of salespeople's names that came up as being reviewed highly.
Yeah.
And so then I went online, found that person, called them up, and that person ended up not being the person I was going to work with because they were not really available, I would say.
Okay.
So, some of it was, hey, I'm out delivering a vehicle. Okay, great, call me back. Didn't call me back.
Yeah.
The next day, he was off for a couple days. And so I was like, that's great. Don't really want to lose the truck. So I ended up calling someone else at the dealership. And he was great. We did a video call. And so he pulled the truck up, he had it running, and was just kind of walking around the truck and showing me different things. I had him kind of put it underneath the vehicle, kind of look to see if there was rust or anything like that. There was like a little light or alert on the dash. I said, hey, is that something you guys can fix? You know what that is? They said, yeah, we can get that fixed, not a problem. And so we talked a little bit about pricing, and I still wasn't totally comfortable because I hadn't physically seen it. And so he was talking to me a little bit about, well, we can set this up so you can buy the vehicle. If you don't like it, when you get out here, test drive it. If you don't like it, you want to cancel, we can cancel the whole thing. Everyone kind of walks away. So I was like, okay, I feel pretty good about that. Yeah. It's a reputable dealership in the area. And so we started moving forward. I knew it had a clean Carfax. It was single owner.
Yeah.
Really clean vehicle.
Mm-hmm. So I want to double click on a couple of the things that you touched on there. But first, I want to circle back around. You know, you mentioned 4-wheel drive. You mentioned low miles. You mentioned clean. Were there any other features that were? It was like, man, I really want fill in the blank. I got to have that heated steering wheel because I'm moving to Ohio. I mean, were there any of those?
I wanted heated seats and I wanted Apple CarPlay.
Okay.
Those are kind of my two other things that I wanted.
Yeah, if you're going to spend the money, like those are the things that you want in the vehicle. Okay.
Yep.
So how important then for you, it sounds like pretty important, but you had a short list of features, but it sounds like inventory, really the piece of inventory, the vehicle drove a lot of your purchasing decision, right? Like you figured out what you wanted, and then it was a matter of finding out who had it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. So what did that? Sorry, just kind of going back a little bit here, but what did that search process look like for you? So eventually, you found a dealership that had the car that you wanted. I mean, was it literally just Google dealerships with a 2022 Toyota Tacoma? Like, what was the?
Yeah. So it was a little bit of online search, and I looked at just some kind of online buying sites, and I was like, I don't know how I feel about it.
Yeah.
And then I started looking at dealerships just around me.
Okay.
And I would just go on Google and I'd kind of look at, okay, who's rated really well on Google, and then I would take a look at their inventory. Yeah. And with me, I was kind of looking at new, looking at used. So I was looking at both, and I went in to talk to a couple different dealerships in Arizona, and I kind of knew the ones in Ohio.
Right.
So I would say my search kind of went pretty quickly to dealerships kind of in the areas I knew I was going to be that were also rated well. If they were rated bad, I didn't even really look.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's great. Okay. So it was, you knew what you wanted, if I'm understanding correctly, you knew what you wanted, but you were still visiting each store, basically giving each store an opportunity, assuming that they had a good overall rating, right? Yeah. So if other people had reviewed them and had a good experience, you were going to those individual store websites because you wanted to see everything that was available. That's great. Okay, so makes a lot of sense. And then you mentioned reviews as well. Something that was interesting, I actually jotted it down, was you were looking for individual salespeople. Why individual salespeople? Why not just the overall dealership rating? Why not just call the main line and let the receptionist point you to the right person?
Yeah, so a couple reasons. So some dealerships have a really good or bad service department. Some have a really good or bad sales department.
Sure.
But all the reviews for those get clumped in together. So sometimes a dealership can have a really good sales crew, but their overall score can be kind of pulled down because of a bad, maintenance group.
Yeah.
So that was kind of one reason I was looking. But also maybe I'm just particular about who I work with. I want to know that I'm kind of working with someone who knows how to have a conversation with me and can be real with me and connect with me. And for me, that connection is important. And future car purchases and everything, I want to be able to know I could go back to that person and buy again. I feel good about that relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and another thing, thinking about that then, you mentioned that you guys did a video call, like I assume FaceTime or something like that, right? So I think that's really interesting because in so many cases, you can kind of think of online buying as you're interacting with a website, right? And you're maybe chatting but the reality is for in your experience, at least, you wanted help, you wanted an in-person experience, you wanted questions answered, you wanted somebody to buy from, right? You wanted a relationship, and just because that person wasn't in the same state as you didn't prevent you from having that relationship.
Right.
So I think that's something that's really interesting to call out, because I don't know, how did that feel, I guess, to you for that interaction? Because in so many instances we get used to being in person, right? Like we're sitting across the table from each other. But we also do interviews in here where somebody's on the screen, right? And it still feels fine. So I'm curious, from your perspective as a consumer and the one that was getting ready to fork over a bunch of money for a vehicle, how did it feel? Did you feel connected?
Especially after the video call, definitely felt more connected. I'm a face-to-face kind of guy, so I like being able to. That's kind of my priority one. I really like to be able to talk to someone face-to-face, whether I'm at work or whatever.
Yeah.
But having the video call with him, kind of being able to see him and physically see the car, there's not much of a difference between physically being there in person and seeing it on video.
Yeah.
So that definitely gave me significantly more comfort about moving forward with the vehicle, and he was great. I mean, just very personable, we did the video call, and I was like, look, let me tell you about my situation. I'm out here in Arizona. I'm coming out in a few weeks, and I'm interested in this vehicle. I've never bought a vehicle online before, so I'm a little uncomfortable. You're showing me the video and everything. What else can we do here to kind of help with this comfort level?
Right.
And that's kind of where he went into talking about, hey, look, we can set this thing up so that you can basically buy the vehicle if you want to back away, and we can completely cancel it when you get out here, you test drive or whatever, you don't like it, and we're all good.
Good.
So
yeah, no, I like that. So let's talk a little bit about the deal structure, because it was a fairly, I'll call it a simple deal structure, because there weren't as many variables as some others, which I want to dig into it a little bit, because I do think it's important to understand what that looks like as well. So for you, I think you mentioned you had a company vehicle, so you did not have a trade-in.
Yep.
Right. And then used vehicle, so finance or cash?
It was cash.
Okay, cash deal. So so no finance needed. So what did that deal structure look like? What did the paperwork look like? Was it sent to you digitally? Did you sign it when you got there? Again, pretty straightforward deal, right? It's a one-sided transaction, and it's cash, so that makes it a little bit easier on the dealership. But from your perspective, what did that look like? How did that interaction go?
Yeah, so they had like a secure document portal.
Okay.
I don't remember the name of it, but I could go in, and so I kind of had to sign up and get access to it.
Yep.
And
kind of send you an email link. And, okay.
And it was nice because I like to read through contracts before I sign stuff, so I had an opportunity to just kind of look through it and make sure everything was good. And once I was good with it, it was you're kind of signing digitally, and you hit approve or complete or whatever, and it's done. How
many pieces of, well, I guess not pieces of paper, how many pages of PDF did you have to go through? How many signatures were there? Was it a lot? Or
it wasn't bad. Okay. There were a handful probably, but it's been a few months now, so I'm trying to remember. But it wasn't like buying a house or anything. It was a few kind of signatures and moving on.
Yeah. Now, if you were going to finance a vehicle, do you think you still would have done it remotely? If you needed either your bank to do the financing, if you would have needed the dealership to arrange the financing, would that have changed your approach at all?
I don't think so.
Okay. No, that's good. And I find it really interesting, the comfort level of consumers with finance, right? There's so many more variables if you're going to finance a car, right? As far as rate and everything else that goes into it, and what you can get through a dealership, and how they can, and for many consumers, they need help with that, right? They don't know how to go get a loan at their bank for a vehicle, and honestly, it can be a little bit of a pain to do it. So just working through the dealership in a lot of ways is simpler, easier, faster, and often you get a better rate.
Yeah.
So for you though, you think, assuming that everything went smoothly, you wouldn't have an issue financing remotely either.
I don't think so.
Okay. All right. That's good. That's good to hear. Okay. So then what did the transaction look like? So did you take a check with you when you went and picked up the vehicle? Did you send money electronically to them so that it was yours, and then they would refund it if you didn't like the vehicle? What did the transaction look like?
They wanted me to wire the money to them.
Yep.
And so it was a little weird because someone else reached out to me about wiring the money. I'm like, well, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Because I did, there's a lot of scams out there and everything, right. You just got to be careful about that. So I got this thing about wiring money. I'm like, okay, well, that doesn't sound quite right. So I called the sales guy. We talked, and he's like, oh yeah, this is part of. So I got comfortable with that, and then I just kind of re-verified that the information, the wiring instructions were the correct wiring instructions and everything. And then went to a local bank out there. Yeah. And it was, because of the amount of the transfer, it was going to take a little bit of time.
Sure.
And but going into, actually, I couldn't do it completely remotely. I had to go into a branch because of the amount that it was.
Okay.
But they were able to do that with me being in the branch, and it was good.
Yeah.
So pretty simple from the getting the money to them. But they wanted the finances prior to me getting out there. Otherwise, I would have just brought a check.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So that was then a couple weeks before you actually took delivery of the vehicle?
Yeah.
Okay. So
that was probably, I don't know, 8 to 10 days before, something like that.
Good. And then, so you get there, and what does that process look like? So you can, I don't know, it's interesting, for a dealership, right? The vehicle sold, you paid me, right? Here's your car. How was that delivery experience for you, knowing that you already sent them the money? Was it literally, here's your keys, see you later, or was there more to it? What did that look like?
Yeah, so from that point on, I'd really been working with the maintenance manager of the dealership.
Yep.
So because he was working on that little alert or warning on there, and it had to do with the blind spot monitoring. There was an issue with one of the sensors, and so when I got out there, I was able to test drive and everything. Okay, everything's good, but the alert's still there. So I was talking to the guy. He's like, "Yep, we're working on it. We'll get it taken care of. In the meantime, we're going to give you a loaner vehicle." So, from my perspective, I didn't have a vehicle, so I needed something where I was going to have a rental vehicle until I could get it. So that I was happy they gave me the loaner vehicle, and I kind of let them just take their time getting it fixed. It took about a week for them to kind of get it figured out, and then I picked it up.
That's great. So, how did you feel about that? They took care of you, but if I'm in your shoes, right, I sent you money, we talked 2 weeks ago. I sent you money a week and a half ago. You said you'd have this fixed. I get here, it's not fixed, right? And again, they gave you a loaner, so no harm, right?
Yeah.
But still, was that disappointing? Did that have an impact on your overall experience?
It was a little disappointing, especially you get a lot of windshield time driving across the country. You're thinking about the vehicle, and you get out there and you're kind of hoping, okay, they're going to have it all polished up for me. It's going to be ready to go. And it wasn't that. And I think the most ideal scenario, the sales guy I was working with would be there and, hey, nice to meet you in person and kind of close things out, I guess.
Yeah.
But I'd had several interactions with the maintenance manager over the phone, and he was great. And we had numerous we got to talk about the truck a little bit, and I know he was busy, but he took time to to talk with me and everything. Yeah. And then obviously not being able to take the truck with me. And he said, look, you can take the truck with you now and bring it back and we can get this handled. And I was like, no. And he offered up a loaner vehicle. So I said, let's just do the loaner vehicle. You guys get this situated. So detracted a little bit, but the fact they took care of me, giving me the loaner vehicle, it was fine.
Mm-hmm. Now, you mentioned in your search, you were looking at reviews. Yeah. Did you leave a review for this dealership?
I did not.
Man, as important as the review process
I know.
Was for you, you haven't left a review for them. All right. You got to go do that. You got to do them a solid since it made an impact on you and your buying.
Yeah. Overall, I would say that experience was decent. It wasn't like I think they could have done some more personal type things to make it kind of really a slam dunk.
Yeah.
But it was decent. Yeah, I probably should go back and leave more review.
Well, you mentioned some more personal things. So our audience is mostly dealers, right? So what are some of those things maybe that stand out in your mind as like that would have been a really nice touch, or if maybe you think about it and it's like, boy, if they would have done this, I probably would have left a review because I was so excited, right? I was so pleased. And your experience is one where, as I hear it, and I'm kind of the same way, right? Like if I have a really great experience, I want to do that person or that company kind of a favor and leave a review because I'm like, man, people need to know this place is great. And very, very, very rarely, maybe once or twice in my life, have I left a negative review.
Yeah.
But it's got to be a pretty darn bad experience. Usually you're somewhere in the middle, right?
And that's kind of where I was.
Yeah, and you just don't have that passion to be like, yeah, that was fine. Like, why spend the time leaving a review?
Yeah.
So are there any things in your mind that would have kind of tipped the scale for you, where you're like, man, that was great, and you really wanted to share that with other people?
So the process felt very much process driven, like they were a machine, and I was just kind of going through their process. And I'm working with this person, now I work with this person, now I work with this person, and see you later. So I think having maybe that salesperson that I was working with that ultimately sold me the vehicle, if he was there when I picked it up and was able to, hey, nice to meet you in person, and great doing business with you. It's a big purchase for me,
right?
And having a little bit more of that connection, I think, would have made the experience better. Obviously, if they had the vehicle ready to go, because it's not like I bought the vehicle and was there. I bought the vehicle and then they had, over a week and it still wasn't ready. So, just things that show they value the business and they value that this transaction happened and we're going to follow through on it and be ready for you. They knew exactly what day I was going to be there, what time I was going to be there.
Yeah.
Little things like that, I think, would have made the experience great.
Yeah, no, that's good. And I'm interested too. You mentioned, feeling like basically every person in the process from the dealership had a role, right? Like, okay, I work with this person for these three things.
Yep.
Now I work with this person for these three things, and now I get turned over to this person. So, for you, it sounds like you didn't have necessarily the personal connection that you were craving, that you wanted, that would make you feel connected and probably more loyal to that dealership. Right.
And perhaps it would have been different. I've bought vehicles in person before, and that whole process felt fine because you kind of build a relationship with the salesperson, then you go and you work with the finance, and then you kind of go through that process.
Right.
In this case, it was like, look, I've never seen you guys. I've never seen the truck. I've never been to your dealership. I had years ago, but it's nice having that separation when you can have, I know this is my guy. He's helping me get this transaction done. He's looking out for me through the process. I didn't feel like I had anyone looking out for me. I kind of knew enough to look out for myself through the process.
Yeah.
Just would have been nice to have someone to kind of, I guess for lack of better words, hold my hand a little bit to kind of see it through.
That's interesting. It's interesting to hear you say, that same process felt fine in person. But it doesn't translate online because for whatever reason, there's just a little bit more, maybe lack of trust is a little strong, but there is something about being across from someone where you can connect much quicker, much easier.
Yeah.
Having that physical distance between you, even with a video call, I mean, you still, it's not as easy to connect.
Yeah.
So I don't know, and I think about a lot, and we talk about a lot, having a single kind of seamless process online, in store, whatever it is. But what you bring up is interesting in that it can't be exactly the same. It can be the same process, but how you handle it has to be a little bit different. You mentioned having somebody looking out for you, and I've talked to dealers who use the word concierge, right? Like there's somebody, they're not necessarily salespeople, right? But they're the person that is your person that guides you through that process.
Yeah.
And just listening to you describe your experience, it seems like that's pretty spot on. Like if you could have had something like that and had somebody at the dealership who believed that their role was to be your concierge and make sure that your experience was just smooth, easy, questions were answered, that probably, it sounds like, would have resulted in a better experience for you.
And I don't think I need a whole lot, but like had the sales guy reached back out and said, hey, I heard this is where you're at in your process. How are you feeling about everything? How's everything going? Would have felt better.
When you think about, being in the store, everything's done in 4 hours, right? Which we talk about that being too long and whatever, but it's still 4 hours, right? Like you're done. And your process took, I don't know, days, weeks.
It took days, 2-3 days.
So there's chunks of hours, if not days, between each interaction.
Yeah.
And I think that can be something that is hard to comprehend. So when you're the employee of the store, right? I mean, you're busy all day long. Nothing's changing for you, right?
Yeah.
You're working the same process that you always do. Everything's going. The difference is on the consumer side, where when you're in the store and everything's kind of back to back to back, yeah, you might wait a little bit to get into F&I or something, but you're still in it, right? It's one experience versus when you're remote, let's say you spend 20 minutes with your sales guy on that video call, looking at the car, right? And now you have 12 hours or however long it is, 24 hours where you go about your life, right? Like you go to work, you go home, you run your errands, you go for a hike, you whatever. Next you go to bed, you get up, and then the next day you have another interaction with the dealership. So instead of being a 4-hour window where that's what you're doing, there's a stop and start. And it sounds like that's where the gap is in experience, where it's like when you have to stop, go on with your life, and then start over again, you don't feel connected.
Yeah. You know, and even just like for me, I'm a little wary of just security and especially transferring money. And so I've been talking with this guy, and out of the blue, I get someone reaching out to me about wiring money over.
Right.
And I'm like, well, who is this person? And you know, I end up making calls back to the dealership and trying to figure out, is this legit? It just made things a little more uncomfortable than I think it needed to be.
Yeah. No, that's good. That's a good perspective. Okay. We talked about a lot. This is a great conversation. What haven't we talked about that stands out to you that we should? Anything that we didn't touch on kind of in this experience, in this process for you?
Yeah, I don't think so. It was, I'd do it again.
Yeah.
You know, I like doing in person whenever I can, but if I was in the situation again, I'd do it again.
Yeah. Or if, you know, the inventory was somewhere else, right? Like if you really had a truck that you had to have, you just got to have, you know, fill in the blank, Ford Lightning, right? And the one in the color that you want with the features you want is in wherever, Madison, Wisconsin. Like that's where it is, right?
Yep. And I've looked in the past, and there are certain dealerships in the country that if I was buying a certain type of vehicle, I know that's where I would buy a new vehicle from because of the experiences. So I'll go out on blogs, I go on Reddit, and we'll kind of see. You know, there's certain dealerships that have a certain reputation.
Yeah.
And I would you know, buy it online or buy it through them remotely and then fly out and bring it back.
Yeah.
If I were to go that route. So, and at some point, that might be what I end up doing. We'll see.
Maybe. Yeah. Good deal. All right. Well, Jack Shepp, thank you very much for coming in, sitting down, sharing your experience. Again, we don't get your perspective, you know, the consumer's perspective a lot. So it was good to hear, and really appreciate you taking time.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Have a good one.
Yep.
Well, that was a fun one with Jack Shepp. I really appreciate him coming in and sitting down and talking about his experience, a different perspective than what we usually get. So I hope you found it valuable. I certainly enjoyed the conversation. Before we hop off, don't forget you can watch or listen to episodes of Connected on YouTube, Apple, or Spotify podcasts. And make sure to hit subscribe so you're notified every other Wednesday when new episodes are released. Thanks so much, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.